Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Pushkin Club and indeed to Pushkin House. Last Saturday was the 221st anniversary of the birth of Alexander Pushkin. We thought that a fitting way to mark Pushkin's birthday this year would be by having a poetry reading in celebration of the Boldino Autumn. I'm delighted that Lucy Daniels, Antony Wood, and Alla Gelich, our Russian reader, are able to join me in reading some of the wonderful poetry Pushkin wrote during his time at Boldino in the autumn of 1830. I'd like to say a few words by way of introduction. On Easter Sunday, the 5th of April, 1830, Alexander Pushkin, for the second time, made a formal proposal for the hand of the 18-year-old Natalia Goncharova. This is the well-known portrait of Natalia Goncharova by Karl Brummell. And here is a sketch or a drawing of Natalia by Pushkin. Pushkin had proposed to Natalia a year earlier. This first proposal hadn't been rejected outright. He had been told on that occasion that Natalie was still too young. This time, Natalia's mother accepted his proposal for her daughter's hand. Upon Alexander's engagement, his father transferred to him part of the Pushkin family's ancestral lands, along with 200 serf families. The poet was now a country squire in his own right and had to visit his estate to deal with all the formalities of taking over his new property. On the 31st of August, 1830, Pushkin left Moscow for the village of Boldino. He traveled 500 miles to the east, only stopping to change horses. He reached his family seat on the 3rd of September, 1830. This is a picture of the main building on the Boldino estate, and this is an autumn view showing the lake. The Boldino estate in the Nizhny Novgorod province had been associated with the Pushkin family since the end of the 16th century and had finally been given to the poet's ancestor, Fyodor Pushkin, by Tsar Mikhail I during the time of troubles. This was for the services he had rendered during the recapture of Moscow from the Poles in 1612. Pushkin never intended to stay in Boldino for very long, but fate decreed otherwise. At that time, a cholera epidemic had just broken out in Russia, and many provinces were put under quarantine. As a result, Pushkin remained stranded in Boldino for 3 months. Those 3 autumn months brought forth several dozen incredible masterpieces in both verse and prose. The 2 words, Boldino Autumn, Boldinskaya Osien, have since become a set phrase in Russian that is used to describe a superhuman flight of inspiration. Pushkin came to Boldino full of foreboding and anguish. He was about to say goodbye to his merry bachelor's life. His fiancée had been left behind in cholera-besieged Moscow. Her mother kept putting financial demands on him. The Goncharovs were an impoverished family, and he was having to marry Natalie without any dowry. Not only that, on the insistence of Natalie's mother, he had to pay for her dowry. And so in Boldino, he had to get his own financial affairs in order. The picture you can now see is a drawing by Pushkin of his future mother-in-law from that time. He regarded Natalia's mother as a serious obstacle and titled the drawing Maminka Kars, Mother Kars, comparing her to the unassailable Turkish fortress at Kars. Because of all these enormous pressures, Pushkin was experiencing a host of different thoughts and feelings. Yearning for his fiancée, boredom and irritation with the worldly chores he was having to perform, thoughts about both the past and the present, and philosophical contemplations on the meaning of this life. All of this found expression in verse. The haunting poem Demons, Biesi, which we will read as our first poem, was written on the 7th of September 1830, 4 days after his arrival, and embodied in melodious words the author's nightmarish visions. The next day, 8th September 1830, Pushkin wrote Elegy, Elegy, one of his greatest achievements. It was the poetic confession of his innermost hopes. I wish to live, to suffer, and to think. The mind's creation will not cease to wring warm tears from me. Pushkin struggled with fate throughout the whole of his life. Elegy reflects his readiness to withstand any blows that fate would deal to him. I know that grief and cares will burden me, but pleasures also life will surely bring. We will read Elegy as our final poem. The theme of fate underlies everything Pushkin wrote in Boldino that autumn. In the poem written on a sleepless night, he asks fate, "What is it you want from me? I want to understand you. I'm seeking sense in you." Having poured out his cherished thoughts in these first few poems, Pushkin started appreciating his environment. In a letter to Pyotr Pletnyov, his publisher and friend, he wrote as follows: "These parts are a sheer delight. Plains stretching out on all sides, no neighbors anywhere around. I am free to ride about the countryside or sit writing at home to my heart's content." He was writing in never to be surpassed ecstasy. In another letter to Pletnyov, Pushkin stated with justified pride, "It's been a long time since I have been as productive as I am now at Boldino." Indeed, it was the most productive period of his entire life. In Boldino, he wrote what he first intended as the 3 concluding chapters of Eugene Onegin, the 8th, 9th, and 10th. However, he knew only too well that the original chapter 10, which was to tell of Onegin's involvement with the Decembrist rebels, couldn't be published. So he enciphered the beginning of this chapter, and on the 19th of October, the sacred anniversary of the opening of his alma mater, the lycée at Tsarskoye Selo, he burnt chapter 10. The first part of this chapter, the bit he had enciphered, was only deciphered in the 20th century. The original chapter 8 became excerpts or fragments from Onegin's journey and appeared as an appendix to the main work. And the original chapter 9 became the 8th and last chapter of his great novel in verse. The finishing of Eugene Onegin, a part that is from Tatiana's letter, which Pushkin added later, symbolized the whole previous period of the poet's creative work. And he celebrated the finishing of his 7 years, 4 months, and 17 days' work on Eugene Onegin by writing the poem Trud, which will be read this evening in Vladimir Nabokov's translation as the work. we will, of course, also be reading it in Russian. The number and quality of works Pushkin produced in Boldino are astonishing. Apart from the concluding chapters of Onegin, he wrote or completed over 30 short poems, the comic narrative poem, The Little House in Kolomna, a satirical essay, The History of the Goruchina Village. This is a parody of the Russian people, of a history of the Russian people by Nikolai Polivoy, The Fairy Tale of a Priest and His Handyman Balda, The Fairy Tale of a She-Bear, as well as a number of critical articles and letters. But the towering achievement of his Boldino Autumn was the writing or completion of the 4 short dramatic scenes in blank verse, which Pushkin called the Little Tragedies. The Miserly Knight, Mozart and Salieri, The Stone Guest, and finally, The Feast During the Plague. He also wrote 5 novellas or short stories, known as the Tales of Bielkin, Povesti Bielkina. The Little Tragedies and Tales of Bielkin were completely new genres for Pushkin. And the Tales of Bielkin became a landmark in Russian literature. Tolstoy was to call them the finest prose ever written in the Russian language. The Little Tragedies and Tales of Bielkin heralded the beginning of a completely new period in Pushkin's writing and in Russian literature as a whole. However, I would like to underline one particular aspect of the Tales of Bielkin, which was noted for the first time by Anna Akhmatova. I've already mentioned that Pushkin struggled against fate throughout the whole of his life. Akhmatova writes how on the threshold of his new married life, he writes 5 short stories and tries to enchant fate by bringing all 5 novellas against all the odds to a happy ending. In Anna Akhmatova's words, the happy endings in the Tales of Bielkin were a bizarre bewitching of destiny, through which Pushkin prompted fate to save him, showing fate that there are no hopeless situations and that happiness, in spite of all the odds, is attainable. Among the short poems written in Boldino, there are 3 where the poet says farewell to 2 women he had loved during the time he had spent in Odessa in 1823 and 1824. One of them was Elizaveta Vorontsova, whose portrait you can now see. To her, Pushkin addressed the poem Farewell, Proshania. This is a portrait of Amalia Riznich, who had to part from Pushkin and leave Odessa for Italy with her merchant husband. She died there shortly afterwards. Pushkin addressed to her the poems Invocation, Zaklinania, and Bound for Your Distant Homeland, Для берегов отчизны дальной. We will be reading the second of those 2 poems. Now, a brief word about the poet's daily routine. The poet broke off from his work only for meals and strolls on foot or horseback in the surrounding steppeland. As Pushkin himself said, step after step, of neighbors not a soul, ride as much as you like. And as he also put it, I wake up at 7 o'clock, drink coffee, and lie in bed till 3 o'clock. I have been writing a lot recently and have already written a heap of things. At 3 o'clock, I go riding. At 5, I take a bath, and then dine on potatoes and buckwheat porridge. Then I read till 9 o'clock. This picture shows Pushkin, after his early morning coffee, working while reclining in bed, his preferred method of writing. And this picture shows Pushkin riding in the surrounding countryside, which he would do until dusk. As he put it, he was searching in the universe for melodious rhymes for his poetry. The house on the estate was pretty run down. None of the Pushkin family had lived there for several generations. But as soon as he crossed the creaking threshold to go outside, the poet found himself in a gorgeous park, which stretched to the horizon. Crossing it was an avenue of linden trees with a garden seat at the end. He spent hours sitting there, his gaze wandering over the stepland vistas that opened up before him. Pushkin had brought with him to Boldino an English volume, the poetical works of Milman, Bowles, Wilson, and Barry Cornwall, which had been published in the original English in Paris. The poet had obtained this book in 1829, and it was one of his favorite books. His interest had been attracted by the dramatic scenes written by Barry Cornwall. This was the pen name of Brian Proctor, a verse-writing solicitor who moved in literary circles. As Antony Wood has explained in the introduction to his translation of the Little Tragedies, Cornwall's dramatic scenes in blank verse presented climaxes without exposition or development, reveling in the heightened emotional moment and the grand speech. This gave Pushkin the idea of how dramatic subjects might be treated in blank verse. In Boldino, Pushkin was prompted by Barry Cornwall's poems on similar subjects to write I Am Here in Azilia, which we're going to read, and from Barry Cornwall, Here's a Health to Thee, Mary, Piu za zdravie, Mary. That autumn, Pushkin realized his intention of writing his own dramatic scenes or little tragedies. As already mentioned, Pushkin indeed titled these pieces the Little Tragedies. All four of them have an autobiographical connection. The Miserly Knight echoes the miserly treatment of the poet by his father. In The Stone Guest, Don Juan's illicit arrival in Madrid reminds us of Pushkin's attempt 5 years earlier to ride illicitly to St. Petersburg from his Mikhailovskoye exile. He had turned back because of two bad omens that he had witnessed on the way. First, he had met a priest, and then a hare had crossed his path. It was only because of these omens that he had never made it to St. Petersburg, and so wasn't in the capital on the 14th of December, 1825, the day of the Decembrists' uprising. Mozart and Salieri was based on the widespread rumor that the diligent but mediocre composer Salieri had poisoned the unruly genius Mozart. In it, in Antony Wood's words, Pushkin shows the impact of uncontrollable genius on common humanity. The piece also evokes the vicious treatment to which Pushkin's own works had been subjected by his contemporary critics. However, none of the Little Tragedies was as relevant to Pushkin's state of mind in Boldino as The Feast During the Plague. This was because in the volume of English authors I just mentioned, Pushkin's imagination had been caught by the Scottish writer John Wilson's historical melodrama, The City of the Plague. This was due to the fact that Russia was now experiencing a similar situation with cholera raging all over the country. The Feast During the Plague is Pushkin's free translation of part of one scene from Wilson's work, which had originally been published in 1816. Pushkin takes on Wilson's setting, London during the Great Plague of 1666 and 1667, the characters being young naval officers of the English fleet home from the Dutch wars. One scene in Wilson's drama, with its penetrating psychological insight, came to the poet as a profound shock. This was a scene of drunken revelry around tables laden with food and drink, in the street of a plague-infected London. Pushkin first translated Wilson's blank verse into Russian. He then converted it into a tragedy of his own, The Feast During the Plague, concentrating it into a single scene of carousal by desperate survivors of the Great Plague. The central characters are Walsingham, the master of the revels, and the priest. Their confrontation provides the dramatic action. As the literary scholar Yuri Lotman wrote, the master of the revels fights the plague by plunging into unrestrained freedom, and the priest fights it by appealing to moral responsibility. However, freedom and responsibility are two inseparable sides of the same coin, and The Feast During the Plague is the only play in the cycle where the struggle of the warring heroes ends not with the death of one of them, but with their moral reconciliation. In the three other plays of the cycle, the heroes, each driven by their obsession, either die, as in The Miserly Knight and Don Juan, or commit murder, as in the case of Salieri. The highlights of The Feast During the Plague are its two songs, Mary's Song and Walsingham's Hymn to the Plague, both of which we're going to read. As Antony Wood has put it, the two original song lyrics with which Pushkin replaced Wilson's, and his judicious editing and pruning of his selected fragment, is a miraculous transformation of literary base metal into gold. Pushkin was able to return to Moscow only on the 5th of December, 1830. The 3-month Boldino Autumn was open. After many more delays and quarrels with his future mother-in-law, he managed at last to marry Natalia Goncharova on the 18th of January, 1831. This is a drawing of the couple at the time of their marriage by E.A. Ustinov. In Pushkin's life, there were to be two more Boldino Autumns, in 1833 and 1834. During the first of these, he wrote almost as many works as in 1830. Among them were the narrative poem, The Bronze Horseman, the prose tale, The Queen of Spades, his completion of the history of Pugachev, two fairy tales, and a number of short poems. At Boldino, in the autumn of the following year, 1834, Pushkin wrote only one work. This was the fairy tale of the Golden Cockerel. The Boldino Autumn manuscripts are continuing to provide literary scholars with ample food for thought even today. Experts break lances in the interpretation of every line, every comma, and every spontaneous sketch in the margins that came from the pen of the son of Russian poetry. We're now going to read in translation and in the original 6 poems and 2 excerpts from The Feast During the Plague. All of these were written or completed by Pushkin during the Boldino Autumn of 1830. In the tradition of the Pushkin Club, we will read the English translation first, then the Russian original. All the translations, with 2 exceptions, are by Antony Wood. The 2 exceptions are The Work, which is a translation by Vladimir Nabokov, and Written on a Sleepless Night, which is my own translation. The last poem we're going to read is Elegy, Elegia. In this poem, Pushkin, during that bleak time when cholera was raging throughout Russia, declares, "But I have no desire, dear friends, to die. I wish to live, to suffer, and to think. Но не хочу, о други, умирать. Я жить хочу, чтоб мыслить и страдать." Lucy Daniels will now start our recital by reading Antony's translation of Biesi.
you. Demons. Storm clouds hurry, storm clouds whirl, moon plays hide and seek. Faintly lights the flying snow, sky and night are bleak. On we go, and ding, ding, ding goes the little bell. Endless spaces frighten me more than I can tell. Hey there, driver, faster! Horses, sir, they're tired and slow. Besides, the blizzard's blinding me. No more roads, just snow. Strike me dead, we've lost the way. What are we to do? We're the playthings of some sprite. Round and round we go. There he is. Look, up he runs, blowing, spitting fiend, trying to tug a maddened horse down a deep ravine. Next, like some fantastic milepost at our side, he rears. Then he glimmers in the dark. Then he disappears. Storm clouds hurry, storm clouds whirl. Moon plays hide and seek, faintly lights the flying snow. Sky and night are bleak. No more strength to circle on, no more little bell. Now we've stopped. What's that out there? Stump? Wolf? Who can tell? Angry blizzard, weeping blizzard, horses sniff and snort. There he is now, far away, burning eyes cavort. Now the horses start afresh, ding, ding, ding again. See those spirits gathering on the wide white plain, numberless and hideous at their devilries. Moon-dim hordes of demons whirling like November leaves. What can all their wailing mean? Where are they being driven? Some nocturnal burial rite? Some witch bride being given? Storm clouds hurry, storm clouds whirl, moon plays hide and seek. Faintly lights the flying snow, sky and night are bleak. Demons, swarms and swarms of them, flying to a boundless height. Their unending, doleful moan tears and tears my heart.
Бесы. Бесы. Мчатся тучи, вьются тучи, невидимкою луна освещает снег летучий, мутно небо, ночь мутна. Еду, еду в чистом поле, колокольчик динь-динь-динь. Страшно, страшно поневоле средь неведомых равнин. Эй, пошел ямщик! Нет мочи, коням, барин, тяжело. Вьюга мне слепает очи, все дороги занесло. Хоть убей, следа не видно. Сбились мы, что делать нам? В поле бес нас водит, видно, да кружит по сторонам. Посмотри, вон-вон играет, дует, плюет на меня. А вот там во враг толкает одичалого коня. Там верстою небывалой он торчал передо мной. Там сверкнул он искрой малой и пропал во тьме пустой. Мчатся тучи, вьются тучи, невидимкою луна освещает снег летучий. Мутно небо, ночь мутна, сил нам нет кружиться доле. колокольчик вдруг умолк. Кони встали. Что там в поле? Кто их знает, пень или волк? Вьюга злится, вьюга плачет, кони чуткие храпят. Вон уж он далече скачет, лишь глаза во тьме горят. Кони снова понеслись, колокольчик динь-динь-динь. Вижу, духи собрались средь белеющих равнин. Бесконечны, безобразны, в мутной месяце игре закружились бесы разные, будто листья в ноябре. Сколько их! Куда их гонят? Что так жалобно поют? Домового ли хоронят? Ведьму ль замуж выдают? Мчатся тучи, вьются тучи, невидимкою луна освещает снег летучий. Мутно небо, ночь мутна. Мчатся бесы, рой за роем, в беспредельной вышине, визгом жалобным и воем надрывая сердце мне.
Antony, you're going to read the work now.
The work. Come is the moment I craved. My work of long years is completed. Why then this strange sense of woe, secretly harrowing me? Having my high task performed, do I stand as a useless day labourer stands, with his wages received, foreign to all other toil? Or am I sorry to part with my work, night's silent companion, golden Aurora's friend, friend of the household gods?
Труд. Миг вожделенный настал, окончен мой труд многолетний. Что ж непонятная грусть тайно тревожит меня? Или, свой подвиг свершив, я стою, как паденщик ненужный, плату приявший свою, чуждой работе другой? Или жаль мне труда, молчаливого спутника ночи, друга Авроры золотой, друга пенатов святых?
Written on a sleepless night. I can't sleep, though it's not light. My room is full of darkness and tiresome slumber. Only the monotonous tick-tock of the clock. The three fates babbling like old women. The fluttering of sleeping night. The mouse-like scurrying of life. Why are you troubling me? What's your meaning, boring whisper? Reproach or grumbling by my wasted day? What is it you want from me? Do you call to me or prophesy? I want to understand you. I'm seeking sense in you.
Стихи, сочиненные ночью во время бессонницы. Мне не спится, нет огня, всюду мрак и сон докучный, ход часов лишь однозвучный раздается близ меня. парке бабье лепетанье, спящей ночи трепетанье, жизни мышья беготня. Что тревожишь ты меня? Что ты значишь, скучный шепот? Укоризна или ропот мной утраченного дня? От меня чего ты хочешь? Ты зовешь или пророчишь? Я понять тебя хочу. Смысла я в тебе ищу.
Bound for your distant homeland. Bound for your distant homeland, you left an alien shore. I wept that hour before you, and I could weep no more. I did my best to hold you, in pleading hands grown chill. The torment of our parting, I strove to hold it still. But from that cruel embracing, you tore your lips away. Bid me from my dark exile to your resplendent day. We'll meet, you promised, under a sky forever blue. In olive's shade, my darling, we'll kiss there and be true. But where the arch of heaven shines a brilliant blue, where olives shade the waters, at last there's rest for you. Your beauty and your suffering are sealed forevermore. With them, the kiss of greeting you kept me waiting for.
Для берегов отчизны дальной ты покидала край чужой. В час незабвенный, час печальный я долго плакал пред тобой. Мои хладеющие руки тебя старались удержать. Томленье страшного разлуки мой стон молил не прерывать. Но ты от горького лобзанья свои уста оторвала. Из края мрачного изгнанья ты в край иной меня звала. Ты говорила: в день свидания под небом вечно голубым, в тени олив, любви лобзанья мы вновь, мой друг, соединим. Но там, увы, где небо своды сияют в блеске голубом, где тень олив легла на воды, заснула ты последним сном. Твоя краса, твои страдания исчезли в урне гробовой, а с ними поцелуй свидания. Но жду его, он за тобой.
We're next going to read Pushkin's Я здесь и Незилья. Here I am in Azilia. But first I'll read an extract from a poem by Barry Cornwall on the same subject. In Azilia, I am here. Thy own cavalier is now beneath thy lattice playing. Why art thou delaying? He hath ridden many a mile, but to see thy smile. The young light on the flowers is shining, yet he is repining.
Here I am in Azilia, in front of your window. The whole of Sevilla is dark and in slumber. here full of high daring and close to the eyebrows, with my strings and my rapier in front of your window. Asleep to the sound of my rousing guitar? If your husband comes down, he'll die by this sword. Hang out a silk cord from that window of yours. Why so slow, being adored by a rival of mine? Here I am in Isilia, in front of your window. The whole of Sevilla is dark and in slumber.
Я здесь, Инезилья, я здесь, под окном. Объята Севилья и мраком, и сном. Исполнен отвагой, окутан плащом, с гитарой и шпагой я здесь, под окном. Ты спишь ли? Гитарой тебя разбужу. Проснется ли старый, мечом уложу. Шелковые петли к окошку привесь. Что медлишь? Уж нет ли соперника здесь? Я здесь, Инезилья, я здесь, под окном. Объята Севилья и мраком, и сном.
From the feast during the plague, Mary's song. Mary sings, once in this our country, peace and plenty ruled. Once upon a Sunday, Holy Church was filled. From the crowded schoolhouse, children's voices pealed. Busy scythe and sickle sparkled in the field. Church is now forsaken. Schoolhouse all forlorn. Darkling groves are empty. Wasted is the corn. Like a burnt out building stands each street of doom. All is still and silent, save the swelling tomb. Always dead are carried. Groans of those that live, peace to the departed, call on God to give. Always room is needed. Graves of fresh interred draw their ranks together like some frightened herd. Should my spring be destined early for the grave, you whom I have loved so, all the joy life gave, pray shun Jenny's body. Do not come too near those dead lips, but follow from afar the bier. Go then from this village, find some resting place where your soul's affliction may be granted grace. When the plague is over, visit my poor dust. Edmund, know in heaven, Jenny will keep trust.
Пир во время чумы. Песни Мэри. Было время, процветала в мире наша сторона. В воскресенье бывала Церковь Божия полна. Наших деток в шумной школе раздавались голоса, и сверкали в светлом поле серп и быстрая коса. Ныне церковь опустела, школа глухо заперта, нива праздно перезрела, роща темная пуста, и селенье, как жилище погорелое, стоит. Тихо все, одно кладбище не пустеет, не молчит. Поминутно мертвых носят, и стенания живых боязливо Бога просят упокоить души их. Поминутно место надо, и могилы меж собой, как испуганное стадо, жмутся тесной чередой. Если ранняя могила суждена моей весне, ты, кого я так любила, чья любовь отрада мне, я молю, не приближайся к телу Дженни ты своей, уст умерших не касайся, следуй издали за ней. И потом оставь селенье, уходи куда-нибудь, где б ты мог души мученье усладить и отдохнуть. И когда зараза минет, посети мой бедный прах. А Эдмонда не покинет Дженни даже в небесах.
Master of the Revel song from the feast during the plague. Master of the Revels sings. When great winter he throws at his bitterest foes shaggy legions of frost, ice, and snow, we meet them with feasting's glad glow. The Black Queen with her hosts, a rich harvest she boasts. Her dread spade taps our door night and day. What can we do now but pray? Let us shut out the plague, like the winter's rampage. We'll carouse and our goblets will drain to the plague's universal reign. There's a savage delight in the thick of the fight, the chasm, the ocean's dark rage, the whirlwind, the smell of the plague. In what threatens with death our mortal breath, should we make its discovery, there is joy, immortality. To the plague then, all praise, she'll not darken our days. Let us drink while the cup overflows of the breath of the Maid of the Rose.
Пир во время чумы. Председатель поет. Когда могущая зима, как бодрый вождь ведет сама на нас косматые дружины своих морозов и снегов, навстречу ей трещат камины и весел зимний жар пиров. Царица грозная чума теперь идет на нас сама и льстится жатвою богатой, и к нам в окошко день и ночь стучит могильною лопатой. Что делать нам и чем помочь? Как от проказницы зимы запремся также от чумы. Зажжем огни, нальем бокалы, утопим весело умы и, заварив пиры да балы, восславим царствие чумы. Есть упоение в бою и бездны мрачной на краю, и в разъяренном океане средь грозных волн и бурной тьмы, и в аравийском урагане, и в дуновении чумы. Все, что гибелью грозит, для сердца смертного таит неизъяснимы наслажденья. Бессмертия может быть залог, и счастлив тот, кто средь волненья их обретать и ведать мог. Итак, хвала тебе, чума, нам не страшна могилы тьма, нас не смутит твое призвание. Бокалы пеним дружно мы, и девы розы пьем дыхание, быть может, полное чумы.
Elegy. The madcap years have long since gone to waste. They hang upon me like a drunken haze. Meanwhile, inside me, sadness from the past grows in strength like wine with lengthening days. The course that I must take will offer me troubles and toils and a tormented sea. But I have no desire, dear friends, to die. I wish to live, to suffer, and to think. I know that griefs and cares will burden me, but pleasures also life will surely bring. I shall again drink in sweet harmony. The mind's creations will not cease to wring warm tears from me, and on my sad decline, perhaps one day, love's farewell smile will shine.
Элегия. Безумных лет, угасшее веселье, мне тяжело, как смутное похмелье. Но как вино, печаль минувших дней в моей душе чем старе, тем сильней. Мой путь уныл, сулит мне труд и горе грядущего волнуемое море. Но не хочу, о други, умирать. Я жить хочу, чтоб мыслить и страдать. И ведаю, мне будут наслаждения меж горестей, забот и треволнения. Порой опять гармонией упьюсь, над вымыслом слезами обольюсь. И, может быть, на мой закат печальный блеснет любовь улыбкою прощальной. David.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That brings to a conclusion our recital in celebration of the Boldino Autumn. We're very happy to take questions or receive your observations. Oh, thank you. You can, on the reactions button.
It's difficult to know what to do.
I don't want to milk the audience for applause, but on the reactions icon at the foot of the screen, you can raise a hand.
Yes. Very clever.
for my fellow performers. Oh,
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
was,
Thank you.
no, yes, thank you all. I was sorry not to have been able to clap. Actually, there were breaks there where if we were live, I'm sure I would have been clapping, but it felt a bit odd. It was very, very lovely reading. So thank you all very much.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and thank you to Pushkin House for hosting us. You host our physical meetings, and it's wonderful that we can now have these Zoom recitals. I hope we do some more of them.
That would be wonderful. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Those are definitely in the sort of, we have
Oh,
plans.
there's a lot
for
of
them,
thank
so,
yous coming. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
do
there
Michael.
were some comments.
Yes, Michael Holman has raised his hand, Rafi.
Okay, let's.
Oh, Michael.
He's unmuted.
Sorry,
Brilliant.
dear. Hello. Good evening.
Can I make an observation?
Oh, please do.
One often hears that people learn Russian in order to be able to read Pushkin in the original, and no reflection on the quality of the English translation. But listening to Alla reading the Pushkin, where everything fitted so well together and was so rounded and complete, one can understand why people still say, I want to learn Russian in order to read Pushkin in the original.
Well, thank you. Here. That's a marvelous observation, and it resonates with all of us. I think it's absolutely the case. By the way, that is why, Michael, I say it was a tradition of the Pushkin Club to have the English first and then the Russian. That wasn't always the case, but about 20 years ago, we thought the idea of having the if you like, the English translation or version first, so at least those who don't have perfect Russian could get the sense of the content of the poem, but then you hear the true music, and as you say, every word fits. Pushkin is amazing. No, thank you. That's really appreciated, that comment. I mean, he is of course excruciatingly difficult to translate, Pushkin's poetry.
Yeah, echoing that. I mean, I think the way around that we did it was perfect, because my Russian is also rather rusty these days. But hearing the English translations first really sort of brought home let me focus more on the beauty of Pushkin's words and understand them much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, someone in the comments is saying that it's always wonderful to hear Alla read, and that's absolutely agree with that.
Oh, we do. We all totally agree. Well, Alla of course recites.
Read.
Yes, she does. But may I recommend Antony Wood's Pushkin's collected poetry, which is published by Penguin Classics. It came out in April. It really is a superb collection of verse, and that, again, for those whose Russian is not perfect, I find it as good as you can get.
Yes, and our thanks to Antony as well for those translations, and to you, David.
Oh yes.
Yeah, really. It is difficult to translate Pushkin, but when it's done well, you really notice, and I think this was one of those occasions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was our view anyway. Yes.
Do we have any upcoming events in the next couple of weeks? Yes, we do.
Thank you, Rafi.
Well, thank you, Alla. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We do have a couple of upcoming events.
Hosting it so perfectly.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, there are always sort of slight technical issues with these things, but I think we're sort of getting the hang of it these days. And talking of those, we do have a couple more events this month. We'll have 2 events based on our book prize. So one of them will be it's Sergei Medvedev, who's the author, and he'll be speaking in conversation with 2 of our book prize judges in Russian on the 25th and in English on the 23rd. I think those are the right way around. But do check our website if you need to sort of buy tickets. So I think it's actually I think it's free, these events, or they're donation, like any donation you like. Those ones, and we've got one this Friday on fashion after the coronavirus. It's a completely different subject from this, completely different sort of vibe. But if any of you are interested in what some artists, theorists, and academics have to say about fashion after the coronavirus, then do check that out. And I hope we'll have some more Pushkin Club events. We haven't decided, David, have we, whether we'll do this again, but I think we definitely should. I think it's been a real success.
Yes, well, thank you. Well, if that's the view, I mean, it is the, we had thought of an anniversary commemoration for Alexander Bloch in the autumn, because
it wouldn't be anniversary, it would be -1 year.
Well, yes, but it's a long time since we have celebrated Bloch's wonderful poetry. And there's a wonderful poem, which I'm surprised isn't better known, to Pushkin House, Pushkinskому domu. And I think a short introduction and reading a selection of his poems, which are absolutely beautiful, I think that would go quite well. So that's one idea we've got. And we haven't done a huge amount of Pushkin-centered events in recent years. We tend to have something on around his birthday, and we thought this was, for obvious reasons, that the Boldino Autumn was not a bad theme for this year. But there's other stuff, and I think because of the beauty, the clarity, the concision of the verse, I think it does lend itself to this sort of event.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's a bit more intimate, this setting than the house. I think the house is great, and it's obviously we're just waiting to get back there. But seeing people's faces up close in a sort of just one-to-one almost is a completely different experience, and also has its own charm.
Yes, I think so. I'm a great fan of Zoom myself. It's got its limitations, obviously, but you have to adapt the material, obviously, for the medium. And one hopes one avoids overly prolix constructions, just as Pushkin did. And he sets us all a very fine example, stripping out the unnecessary epithets and that sort of thing.
Exactly. Well, I don't see any more questions, unless there's anything else you have to say. We do certainly have time for it. So,
well, no, I'm happy. We thought there might be 1 or 2 questions, but no. But we're extremely grateful for those comments and Michael's observation, and we hope everyone enjoyed it. I mean, one thing is difficult. You can't quite gauge the audience's reaction in the way you can do at a live physical meeting.
I think it was all right.
It was. Well, no, it's the audience to say. The audience are the ultimate judges on these things. It was good, by the way, to have such a large attendance.
Yeah, fantastic.
So we're grateful to Pushkin House for advertising it so well. Michael has raised his hand, Rafi, again.
Yes, Michael.
Michael, yes.
Thank you. This is a question, really, which should have been put earlier on to Antony Wood. When he is translating Pushkin, what does he find he needs to concentrate on most? Because they do say that poetry is what gets lost in translation, which is unkind to the translators. But each translator, when he approaches a new project, has to say, what is for me the most important thing in here? So a question really to Antony, for him, what is the most important thing to try and get across when he's translating Pushkin?
Can I be heard now?
Yes, yes, you can.
Right. There are two things really that are terribly important in translating Pushkin, especially. Continuity is one. Everything should flow, as in Grossman's title, everything flows. I used to translate sort of by individual words, phrases, lines, but now by stanzas, really. And the second thing is weight and emphasis. A heavy word, a light word, polysyllabic, or monosyllabic, either the build-up or the contrast, much more dramatic in Russian, of course. English monosyllables always get in the way and have to be dealt with. Those two things, rhyme is less difficult because nowadays you can have half rhymes and not inexact rhymes. It doesn't matter. It just is one part in the pattern.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any further questions?
Let's say, to finish answering your question, it is an impossible task. You cannot translate Pushkin. You can only get near how you think he should or he could sound in your own language, which in my case happens to be English. Which in many ways is more similar to Russian than, say, Chinese. So I consider myself fortunate.
Well, we'll start preparing for the next event, Rafi.
Yes,
That
sounds very good.
Yes.
Yeah, it is odd that we don't do more Pushkin things, I think. A lot of the time, I suppose we're just worried about oversaturation.
Yes.
But he does lend himself very well to events like this. They're really, well, I mean, there's a reason why he's considered the greatest poet.
Oh, indeed, yeah. Indeed.
Well,
David, I'm wrong. I want to tell David that I'm wrong with
You're
blow,
wrong. Why?
because he was born in 1880, so it is a jubilee year.
Yes. Well, okay. 140th, the 140th anniversary of his birth,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, I take that as a green light.
I
then.
think we should say thank you. David. Sorry, I just wanted to say thank you, David, for having the courage to organise this slightly eccentric way of doing things. And I'm sure we'll all learn how to do it.
Yes, of course.
I agree with that, absolutely.
Yeah, we all.
I know at the beginning it caused some entertainment in certain households within my family who sent me slightly teasing messages while we were all getting set up. So thanks, guys. That really helped. But it was a courageous thing to do, and if it works, good.
No, it was a team. It's an old cliche, but it was a team effort. And by the way, on the technical side, we relied on Rafi very much, and I repeat, we're very grateful to Pushkin House for putting this on and helping it go so smoothly.
Maybe Rafi will be able to record it.
Well, I certainly hope so. We've been trying. Yes. I'll have to let you know how that went. Gave me a bit of a scare at the beginning, saying that people wouldn't record what everybody else was saying, but I hope that didn't happen. So we'll see. These things are quite sort of unreliable sometimes. So if not, then it'll just have to live on in our memories. But either way, it was a really brilliant event.
I was told you should divide it in small pieces, otherwise it's too big
Possibly,
volume
possibly. We can try that next time. Then,
memory.
well, if there aren't any more questions, I think I'll say thank you all very much for attending, and thank you to all the speakers and the organisers for organising and speaking. And I'll hope to see you at the next event. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rafi. And thank you again to the audience. It's where
Thank
we
you.
normally retire for drinks, but
Yeah, I think we'll have to do
not
that
together
individually.
this time.
Still drink. Yes.
Well, thanks very much.
Свидания.
До
Thanks,
свидания.
Rafi. До свидания.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.